using phony, fantastic, but to the gullible, easy to believe fears of death to influence politics. Death panels. Never seen Republicans do that before, right? When I reported that the Bush administration was exploiting fear of death by terrorism for political purposes, I was called every name up to and including traitor. Today, Mr. Bush's first Secretary of Homeland Security admits Ashcroft and Rumsfeld pressured him to raise the threat level the day before the 2004 election. To have been right about this is about as unpleasant a feeling as those reporters got who were right that the World Series was fixed that one year or that Bernie Madoff was a Ponzi artist. The Bush administration used the threat of terrorism to influence domestic events and elections. When I said it here, we called it the nexus of politics and terror. When Mr. Bush's first Secretary of Homeland Security said it today, he called it his new book. Exclusive excerpts and John Dean's reaction next. You're watching Countdown on MSNBC. Manipulating the fear of terrorism for political gain is itself terrorism. And the nexus of politics and terror, as employed by the Bush administration, is now, tonight, confirmed. In our fourth story in the Countdown, a push to raise the terror threat level on the very eve of the presidential election of 2004. Tom Ridge, the former Secretary of Homeland Security, claims to have stopped that particular instance of it. John Dean joins me in a moment. Countdown has obtained an advanced copy of Mr. Ridge's book, The Test of Our Times. A key passage concerns the events immediately preceding the 2004 election. On Friday, October 29, 2004, 4 days before the vote, Osama bin Laden released a new videotape. You'll remember, Mr. Ridge did not think that warranted a change in the terror alert status. He writes, at this point, there was nothing to indicate a specific threat and no reason to cause undue public alarm. But in a subsequent video conference call, quote, a vigorous, some might say dramatic discussion ensued. Attorney General John Ashcroft strongly urged an increase in the threat level and was supported by Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. There was absolutely no support for that position within our department, none. I wondered, is this about security or politics? Post-election analysis demonstrated a significant increase in the president's approval ratings in the days after the raising of the threat level. The position of DHS ultimately prevailed, according to Ridge, because some White House staff agreed that raising the threat level could look politically motivated. He wrote again, I believe our strong interventions had pulled the go-up advocates back from the brink, but I consider the episode to be not only a dramatic moment in Washington's recent history, but another illustration of the intersection of politics, fear, credibility, and security. After that episode, I knew I had to follow through with my plans to leave the federal government. Mr. Ridge also claims that his department was justified in raising the terror threat level to orange in August of 2004 for the financial centers in New York, New Jersey, and Washington. The warning had come just 3 days after the Democratic National Convention, and it soon became evident that the evidence supporting that warning was about 4 years old and largely out of date. Never have I more wanted to be wrong about something, but beginning in October 2005, we periodically ran a segment called The Nexus of Politics and Terror. As this brief introduction from the first time will suggest, sad to say, we told you so. On May 10th of this year, after his resignation, former Secretary of Homeland Security Ridge looked back on the terror alert level changes that were issued on his watch. Mr. Ridge said, more often than not, we were the least inclined to raise it. Sometimes we disagreed with the intelligence assessment. Sometimes we thought even if the intelligence was good, you don't necessarily put the country on alert. There were times when some people were really aggressive about raising it, and we said, for that, the nexus of politics and terror. Please judge for yourself. We hope to have the time to bring you the whole piece again, updated tomorrow. For now, let's bring in, as promised, FindLaw.com columnist John Dean, also author of Worse Than Watergate and Conservatives Without Conscience. John, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Rate this in terms of its confirmation of our worst fears on this subject, that the terror threat apparatus, not just the color-coded bar chart, the whole thing was manipulated for political purposes at least some of the time.
Well, I'd say this is a modified limited hangout, Keith. It's not a full confirmation. It's a hedge. Tom Ridge is a former U.S. attorney. He knows that he's talking about what could be criminal behavior. And he says at one point he wonders if this was political or security. So he backs off, and he doesn't tell us why he wondered it, what he thought that Rumsfeld had said or Ashcroft had said. So he strongly suggested they said something that made him think it was political, but he hasn't given us that. He certainly has opened the door and raised the question.
Well, and you describe it just now in terms of criminal activity. Who is potentially liable, and is anybody in position to do anything about it at this late date?
Well, that's the problem. It is a late date. The statute of limitations has run. As I say, if there was pressure, if you do manipulate an agency of government, it is a criminal offense. This is one of the things that caught a lot of people in Watergate. It's a conspiracy to defraud the government under Title 18 U.S.C. 371, one that, as I say, a lot of people learned painfully what that statute meant. And if you try to have a department do something it's not supposed to do and doing it for political reasons, you can go to jail for that. So as I say, I think Ridge has hedged this. He's been careful, but he certainly suggested he might have gotten information that indicated this was the reason that he had concern.
And as opportunistic as it might look, he did say these things, as I pointed out in the piece from 2005, right after the resignation. So there is a continuity here. It's not like he just invented this or presented it for the first time out of whole cloth. The other side of the argument, though, John, that has been raised today, that since the one example that he points to from the days before the election in 2004 did not end in the elevation of the terror threat level, that diminishes in some way the fact of pressure that was applied. Is there not an obvious fallacy in there?
There is an obvious fallacy, and that isn't the way the criminal law works, for example. If somebody actually conspired to do this, an overt act was made, pressure was made, and they didn't get the pressure to succeed, it wouldn't anyway diminish the crime. Looking at this in a broader context, if this was the conduct and history reveals it to be the conduct, these people got away with a crime.
The Secretary's reaction to this was he needed to leave government. He needed to resign. But of course, he didn't do it in the days before the election, and he did not. Neither did he resign immediately. But was he not in a position, perhaps, to investigate this in some way? At least start to investigate it before somebody shut off his alarm clock?
Well, when listening to your piece, I thought if he's trying in the book to make this a principled resignation sort of retroactively, I don't think it's going to work at all. The question is, why didn't he maybe investigate this further? Indeed, was there more going on that made him wonder if this was political rather than national security? Was he being told from the White House how to make national security decisions on homeland security? These are, as I say, this is a very loaded little bit of commentary from this book.
The message ultimately of the 2004 Bush re-election campaign was vote for us or you might die. Is anybody potentially going to be held account for that message having infected apparently official government actions, as Mr. Ridge at least implies, if not confirms?
Well, I think all of those of us who followed this certainly believe this was the case. They did manipulate it for political purposes. It did work. But the question is, I doubt if Congress, even on this issue, will proceed any further, even with this lead that Ridge has given. If they won't, for example, look at torture, why are they going to look at color-coded warnings as being, which aren't even close to that problem, politically manipulated?
Yeah, and since we got rid of the color coding system, the problem could never come up again, so we don't have to prosecute it. That's the line of logic now. Yeah.
We only had to elect Bush to get rid of the color coding system.
John Dean, author of Broken Government, Worse Than Watergate, Conservatives Without Conscience. Pick a book. They all seem to apply to our topic tonight. Thanks as always, John.
Thank you, Keith.